From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deanna Markham. I'm the Associate Librarian for Library Services, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our poetry reading this evening. We're so happy to see all of you here. We have two wonderful poets for you tonight, David Wagoner and C.D. Wright. And their reading tonight is part of a long tradition at the Library of Congress of establishing links between the library and poets and poetry. So we're very happy to have you here to continue what we think is a very important connection between poets and the library. Some of you may know, and others may not, that it was in 1872 a gentleman by the name of T.N. Hornsby, who lived in Kentucky, petitioned the Joint Committee on the Library, which is, by the way, the oldest congressional committee. It's the first committee established by Congress in 1800, is the Joint Committee on the Library. But he petitioned this Joint Committee to establish a Bureau of Poets and Poesy at the Library of Congress. And the library invited Paul Dunbar, the celebrated African-American poet, to give one of the first poetry readings in the Jefferson Building in the library's Pavilion of the Blind. And that reading occurred in 1897, the year the Jefferson Building opened. But it wasn't until 1936 that a poetry program was officially established at the Library of Congress. Archer Huntington gave funds to establish and maintain a chair of poetry of the English language. And in 1938, the librarian appointed the first consultant in poetry. And over the years, we've had a great variety of poetry consultants and now poets laureate who have helped the library advance the cause of poetry and poets. And we've had so many wonderful programs here over the years. Alan Tate in the 1940s began the archive of recorded poetry and literature, and we now have the recordings of more than 2,000 poets. We're working very hard to get all of those put onto our website so people can hear some of the poets reading their works. More recently, Rita Dove held a two-day conference called Oil on the Waters, the Black Diaspora, in which she featured poets reading their work and music to accompany the poetry. Robert Pinsky started his favorite poem project in 1998. Kay Ryan in 2009, 2010, when she was the poet laureate, created the Poetry for the Mind's Joy. This is a project to inspire community college students to write poetry. We have other parts of the poetry program that are very important to us. The library's Witter-Benner Fellowships are offered to two or more young poets, rising stars. We bring them to the library to read their works, and we also have the Rebecca Johnson Bobbitt Prize, in which we give prizes for books of poetry that have been recently published by an American author. Internally at the library, we've started something called Poetry at Noon. It's one of my favorite programs at the library. We invite local or regional poets to come to the library at noon and read their works. It's a great opportunity to inspire the staff to think about poetry, and it's one of our favorite times. I'm sure you know that W.S. Merwin is our current poet laureate. He has given one reading this year. He will be back in May to give his final reading of the year, but he's been an absolutely wonderful ambassador for poetry across the country this year. And something very important happened today, which I'm very pleased to announce. We issued a press release announcing that Robert Casper is our new head of the library's Poetry and Literature Center. I'm going to ask Rob to stand so you can all see who he is. We are just delighted. I had the pleasure of serving on the selection panel, so I got to ask all the hard questions, and I know that he is ready for this job. Rob is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts. He comes to us from the Poetry Society of America, where he created and coordinated literary events in New York and in cities across the country. He was responsible for programs, not only readings, but also panels and celebrations and award ceremonies and festivals. He's good at fundraising, and we are so excited about having him joining us at the Library of Congress. Monday will be his first day, and we're all anxious, Rob, so be prepared for us. So I've given you a little hint of the kinds of things we're interested in at the Library of Congress, but now let me turn to the real reason we are here tonight, our two poets. David Wagoner is a former editor of Poetry Northwest. He is the author of A Map of the Night poems, Good Morning and Good Night poems, House of Song poems, and many other collections of poems and novels. A former chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, Mr. Wagoner has received the Sherwood Anderson Award, the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, and the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award. The Pacific Northwest features in many of Mr. Wagoner's poems, and critics have said that his collected poems, 1956 to 1976, and his Through the Forest, new and selected poems, are his most representative collections. Our second speaker and poet is C.D. Wright. A professor of creative writing at Brown University, Miss Wright is the author of numerous books. Her newest one, One with Others, will be published in April, and I know it's now published because I saw it just a few minutes ago. Miss Wright has received a MacArthur Fellowship, a Lannan Literary Award, and a Robert Creeley Award, and she also is a member of the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences. She says, my poems are about desire, conflict, the dearth of justice for all, about persons of small means. So we have two treats in store tonight. I'm going to ask David to come first and read, and then he will be followed by Miss Wright. Please welcome our poets for the evening.
It's sort of strange to be asked to talk in a library. When I was young, I was often told not to. I was once asked to give a talk to hundreds of librarians at a convention of school librarians from Idaho, the state of Washington, and Oregon. And I did, and afterward I was sort of uneasy about what I had said or what I had left out or forgotten to say. And as I was driving home through a landscape in central Washington, which is sort of like a Western movie, I just turned aside down an exit that I didn't recognize and drove to the end of a dirt road and got out of my car. And it resulted in this poem, which I have called After the Speech to the Librarians. I was speaking to the librarians, and now I'm standing at the end of a road, having taken a wrong turn going home. I don't remember what I said, something about reading and writing, and not enough about listening and singing. The gate to this dude ranch is locked, and a dozen riderless horses are browsing on a hillside in the gold grass. On a fence post, a marsh hawk is holding still, one eye on me and one on the field, where hundreds of sparrow-sized water pipits are darting and whistling to themselves. Not even thinking of opening a thesaurus, I say on behalf of the librarians, beautiful. Beyond barbed wire, a cracked water tank and a wrecked shed. You could wait there a long time for a school bus. Whoever locked the gate meant no thank you, not today. But it wasn't much use. Everything is trespassing as easily as the hazy sunlight and these gold-breasted birds, taking their sweet time under the hawk's eye, even perching beside him, extremely happy to be where they are and what they are. And the horses, with nothing on their backs, have opened their own gates for the winter. And the librarians are going back to their books in hundreds and hundreds of schools where children will be reading and writing and keeping quiet and listening how not to be so childish. When I wasn't looking, the hawk flew suddenly, skimming the field, effortlessly graceful, tilting and scanning at low level. He stops without slowing down, swivels and drops into the grass, flashing white and tawny, rises at full speed, carrying nothing, and goes on soaring, slanting downhill, higher than my head, making his sharp outcry. The water pipits answer, thin as fence wire, isn't it wonderful not being dead yet? Their breasts all hold the same air as his and mine, and the softly whickering unsaddled horses, and the librarians with which we all might sing for the children. Sometimes poems just happen to you, and all you have to do is describe what happened, and this was one of mine. Between Neighbors. The complainant is a big man in his own goddamn front yard in a wheelchair. His voice is high and highly offended, but only half as loud as the dogs barking on his porch. His goddamn neighbors, a young male couple standing their own ground, deadpanned on the other side of the chain link fence, went and aimed their hose at his expensive bird and hosed it. It was innocently catching a little healthy goddamn sun in its cage. The cop bends close to listen. Then he walks off to consult the complainees, who say the barking goes on till they just can't stand it. If they pass on the sidewalk, the dogs bark. If they decide to swing on their porch, swing, the dogs bark. Oh, so yes, they hosed his parrot and would do it again. The big man says, between barks, listen, he needs the dogs as a signal to tell him strangers are nearby. The cop explains loudly the definition of nuisance, issues a warning, turns his palms like a double stop sign up and against opposite sides, then demonstrates keeping the peace by bending forward and saying, Polly, want a cracker? And offering through the cage bars one healing finger, and the wet-backed, green-backed, red, white, and blue paramilitary macaw gives him counter demonstrations to all of them. What can happen if you give somebody, anybody, the finger? Sorry, I'm drying out. I live in a part of this country where Georgia Pacific, Crown Zellerbach, and Weyerhaeuser, the tree growing company, are still powerful names. I've written a number of poems about what's happening in this country to trees. And here is the latest. The Know-It-All Man. The know-it-all man said to Tree, "Get out of my way," but Tree wouldn't get out of the way. So Know-It-all Man said, "I'll sick old chainsaw on you," but Tree didn't say anything. It just stood there. So Know-It-all Man went and got Chainsaw and said, "Chainsaw, chainsaw, give notchy cut and a notchy undercut to Tree here and show it how to fall down hard and get out of the way." But Chainsaw said, "I'm all out of gas. Give me a shot of gas." So Know-It-all Man went to Pump and said, "Pump, pump, give me a shot in old Chainsaw's empty tank so he can rev up and I can cut down Tree who won't get out of the way." But Pump only dripped and said, "I'm out of juice from over the wire because generator has quit sizzling and humming." So Know-It-all Man went to Generator and said, "Generator, generator, start buzzing again so old Pump can juice the tank of old Chainsaw so I can show Tree how to get out of the way." But Generator said, "It's all River's fault. River won't keep moving fast enough and turn my wheels." So Know-It-all Man went to River and said, "Old River, come on, get a move on and shoot some electrics into old Generator who can pass sparks to old Pump and hose the gas into old Chainsaw so I can chop down Tree and show him how to get out of the way." But River said, "Blame it on rain, who hasn't poured me a drink for a raft of seasons." So Know-It-all Man looked up at Cloud, who was hugging rain to itself, and said, "Cloud, remember my old buddy Wind who knows what to do with Cloud when it gets greedy? You want me to tell old Wind to blow you away?" So Cloud began squeezing rain, and rain began pouring on River, and River began turning the wheels of Generator, and Generator squirted juice into Pump, and Pump began dribbling in gas in a tank of clackety Chainsaw, and Know-It-all Man cut an over notch and an under notch on the wrong places, and Wind, who didn't have any old buddies, began to blow, and Tree got out of the way by falling on Know-It-all Man. In my early years, I had many roommates. I think only one or two that I got to choose. But there was one type I didn't have. Rooming with Jesus. Though he would have no clothes worth borrowing, except for amusement, he wouldn't borrow yours and leave them scattered around unwashed. He would forgive you for making impolite noises and listen to any exaggerated entries in your overlong, untitled, unpublished, and unpublishable autobiography with its anecdotes about schools and carnal love with a straight, polite face. When the rent was due and you needed to render unto the landlord what was the landlord's, he would forgive and forget. If you forgot or didn't or couldn't give, and he would clean up after himself. If you didn't, he would do it for you, and you'd feel guilty naturally and would certainly move out when he gave shelter to beggars, thieves, crackpots, lepers, down-and-out whores, or you again. It's usually a sullen-looking student who thinks he can stump the most obvious question of all, stump you with it. So I decided to try for an all-purpose answer and it's called On Being Asked Once More What a Poem Is. Instead of another song and dance from the book, memorable speech, or statements made on the way to the grave, or whatever, when I think of it, makes me cut myself shaving, or the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected, and so on. This time, not a set speech, or a painful, minimally muttered evasion of it, or dying fall, or a cutting edge. Let's try a more romantic movement, the song and dance themselves, almost in person, for this young man sprawled in the front row, a hip-hop logo glued to his notebook. Why do you listen to songs? What is a song? Why don't you sing one for us? If you can't sing, recite the words of one. If you can't remember the words, make up your own. If they don't sound right without music, make up some music. If you don't know how, then play somebody else's. If you can't play, then dance. Are you a dancer? Has anyone seen you dancing lately? Why were you doing it? Were you listening to singers' words? Were you humming some of those words to yourself or to a partner opposite you, or maybe smack up against you, who was listening and maybe half believing some of them? Well, you who think you can't sing or play or dance or remember the right words, go ask yourself to tell what you're doing is acting out what they call making a poem. Though it's obvious that hardly anybody knows how to write a play, I teach a playwriting workshop from time to time at the University of Washington. And this happened a few years ago. An assignment for student playwrights. I told them to go listen to people talking, to write exactly how some people really talk to each other. And one young man came to the next workshop looking bewildered, holding his notes by thumb tip and fingertip to avoid contamination. He said this is how they talked. They were actually having a conversation. They weren't just interrupting each other, saying whatever it was they wanted to keep on saying. They had to decide today, here and now, like whether to go on with this whatever it was they couldn't think of a name for. They kept looking this way or that way, even at me. I wasn't anybody, just some student scribbling, but never at each other. You could tell they felt bad. They were making up their minds about something important enough to change their lives, maybe forever. But what was coming out of their mouths wouldn't have passed even middle school English. They were both trying to say what hurt, what was disappointing, what wasn't even common courtesy, let alone love. If they'd been actors, good ones, they'd have been making contact. They'd have been improvising something more interesting than shoving their chairs back and standing up and trying to split the bill, dividing it wrong, dropping it, picking it up, and arguing all the way out. Now, what in the hell am I supposed to make of this crap? So I showed him. And another one about writing poetry, or about writing. There may be too many of those in the literature. Trying to write a poem while the couple in the apartment overhead make love. She's like a singer straying slowly off key while trying too hard to remember the words to a song without words. And her accompanist is metronomically dead set to sustain her pitch and tempo. And meanwhile, under their feathers and springs, under their carpet, under my own ceiling, I try to go on making something or other out of nothing but those missing words, whose rhythm is only predictable for unpredictable moments, and then erratic, unforeseeable, even at its source, which ought to be abundantly, even painfully clear. A song is a series of vowels interrupted and shaped by consonants and silence. And gifted singers say, if you can pronounce words and remember how to breathe, you can sing. Although I know some words by heart and think I know how to breathe even down here at work alone, and may be able sometimes to write some of them down right now, it seems improbable they'll have anything much like the permissive diction, the mounting cadences now or then, or now again, the suspended poise, the drift backward, the surprise of the suddenly almost soundless catch of the caught breath, the quick loss of support which wasn't lost at all, as it turns out, but found again, and even again, somewhere in midair, far, far above me. I've committed the sin of being a white man who's written a book of poems based on the Northwest Coast and Plateau Indians' myths and legends. But I'm not sorry. They've been neglected, underrated, much too long. And this, I'll give an example of it. This is based on a Haida myth, and the storyteller's diction of that tribe, though the words are mine. Salmon Boy. That boy was hungry. His mother gave him dog salmon, only the head. It was not enough. And he carried it hungry to the river's mouth and fell down hungry. Salt water came from his eyes, and he turned over and over. He turned into it. And that boy was swimming under the water with his round eyes open. He could not close them. He was breathing the river through his mouth. The river's mouth was in his mouth. He saw stones shimmering under him. Now he was Salmon Boy. He saw the salmon people waiting. They said, "This water is our wind. We are tired of swimming against the wind. Come to the deep, calm valley of the sea. We are hungry too. We must find the herring people." And they turned their green tails. Salmon Boy followed. He saw Shell walking backward, woman who was half stone. He heard the long, high howling of wolf whale, seal woman's laughter, the whistling of sea snake, saw loon mother flying through branches of seaweed, felt changer turn over far down in his sleep. He followed to the edge of the sky where it opens and closes, where moon opens and closes forever. And the herring people brought feasts of eggs, as many as stars, and Salmon Boy ate the stars, as if he flew among them, saying, "Hungry, hungry." But the posts of heaven shook, and the rain fell like pieces of moon, and the salmon people swam, tasting saltless wind under the water, opening their mouths again to the river's mouth. And Salmon Boy followed, full-bellied, not afraid. He swam fastest of all. He leaped into the air and smacked his blue-green, silvery side, crying, "Ayo, I jump," again and again. Oh, he was Salmon Boy. He could breathe everything. He could see everything. He could eat everything. And then his father speared him. He lay on the riverbank with his eyes open, saying nothing, while his father emptied his belly. He said nothing when his mother opened him wide to dry in the sun. He was full of the sun. All day he dried on sticks, staring upriver. I'll read 3 more poems. Ezra Pound said all poets had to make up their minds about Walt Whitman, finally. I had the usual trouble making up mine about him. And reading a recent biography helped. Walt Whitman bathing. After his stroke, he would walk into the woods on sunny days and take off all his clothes, slowly, one plain shoe and one plain sock at a time, his good right hand as gentle as a mother's, and bathe himself in a pond while murmuring and singing quietly, splashing a while and dabbling at his ease. White hair and beard afloat and still streaming down his white chest when he came wading ashore, naked and quivering. Then he would pace in circles, sometimes dancing, a few light steps, his right leg leading the way, unsteadily but considerately for the left, as if with an awkward partner. He seemed oblivious to passers-by, as he was to his bare body, which was no longer a nursery for metaphors, or a banquet hall for figures of self-praise, but a bedroom, or a modest bed in that bedroom, or the covers on that bed, in need of airing out in the sunlight. He would sit down on the bank and stare at the water for an hour, as if expecting something to emerge, some new reflection in place of the old. Meanwhile, he would examine the postures of wildflowers, the workings of small leaves, holding them close to his pale eyes while mumbling inaudibly. He would dress then, helping his left side with his right, as patiently as he might have dressed the wounded or the dead, and would lead himself toward home like a dear companion. I was in the Naval ROTC in college and had to take all the courses required by Annapolis. And among them was celestial navigation. What I learned made me realize this process had been going on for all of us for a long time. The death of the sky. After a blood-red evening, the sky fell as silently as the light it had shed on us through all our other nights. It scattered its fire on fields and hills and cities. The moon first, her face spinning from full to dark, then Venus, unveiled and melting, Mars in a burned shambles, and Mercury with featherless heels, the rubble of asteroids, the ice-laden blurred foxfire of comets, the wind-blown beard of Jupiter spun down and around and through and intermingled with the Saturnalia of Saturn, Uranus castrated again by Kronos and dismembered, Neptune plunging, drowning, Pluto tumbling dead as a stone. And from the broken belt of the zodiac, the ram and the bull brought down to slaughter, the twins parting, the crab clawless, the lion and virgin crumpled together, snarling and weeping ashes, the balanced scales unhinged, the scorpion's tail now stinging only itself, the archer bent it like his bow by the dying goat, the mouth of the fish gaping beside the water carrier, and we stood dazed in that black night, and in the morning the sun rose white into an empty whiteness. And I'll end with this. One of my many former students is a marine biologist. And he told me, yes, we came out of the sea, but we didn't do it on purpose. We tried very hard not to, but got stranded. And it occurred to me it might not be too bad an idea going back. This is going back to the sea. It will seem strange at first, going back underwater, but soon your difficult breathing will feel like a birthright, and you'll settle down to a more buoyant life, where each step and each touch will be an easy impulse to give in to. Your body will discover old proportions, old whispered asides, sotto voce wheedlings, and basso profundo groans, and even your angriest shouts will be dissolved in the wailing, the whistling and humming of others who came back to their senses. In place of speech, you'll have your exclusive silence. Now the dissolution of shadows and the scatterings of the sun into ribbons and broken crescents will show what swims around you, diatoms, plankton, the suspense of colloidal particles, and will blur your vision momentarily into the visionary. And you'll know why you're here, why you've grown tired of breath, earth, and sunlight, tired of your heavy torso slumping, If you go back to the glare and the wind, if you flounder ashore on the sand and lift your shape on surprising legs, and finally stand once more beached, weighted down, your strange nose in the air, you will find what's left of yourself sinking slowly, easily, into half sleep once more. Thank you.
My book is a tribute to a woman I met when I was still in my teens. Totally iconoclastic, irate, hilarious, unsubduable, dazzlingly literary, smart, self-educated woman living in the Arkansas Delta with her husband, with whom she was altogether incompatible, and their 7 children. When her town erupted in 1969 over racial divisions, she stepped up, stepped forward, crossed over, so to speak. So ultimately, my book became a reckoning with those times through the cracked lens of that particular historical moment in that locale. I'm just, this is a book-length poem, posy, as it has unfortunately been called in the past. I'm going to focus mainly on a portrait of this woman and not all of the events that took place, just to give it some coherence. And at the, it moves backward and forward in time, but most of it is sort of situated in 1969, which is the year following Martin Luther King's death. And towns up and down the Delta were having a lot of turmoil. It was a very trying time for these towns, and some of them remained permanently injured by their own actions and by being caught up in those times. My friend's portrait begins at the point of her death, which was about 4 years ago in Hell's Kitchen, which is where she lived the last 20 years of her life, which was the only place where she wasn't a total freak. "It smells like home," she said, dying. And I, "What's that you smell, V?" And V, dying, "The faint cut of walnuts in the grass, my husband's work shirt on the railing, the pulled barbecued evening, the turned dirt. Even in this pitch, I can see the vapor-lit pole, the crepe myrtle not in shadow, my sweet Betsy, that exact streaked sky, the mongrel dog being pelted with rain, mine eyes pelted, all fear, overcome, at last, no scent." That's what she said, dying in the one-room apartment in Hell's Kitchen. I came in by the old road from Memphis, the old military road, across the iron bridge, no one in the field, not a living soul. I drove around with the windows down, the red buds in bloom, sky a discolored chenille spread, weather generally fair. The marchers step off from the jailhouse at Bragg's Spur, 8:17 a.m., more police than reporters, more reporters than police. The threat, they say, is coming from the east, of the 6 Negroes walking to Little Rock and the white woman driving a station wagon. It was something you came through that. V, it was invigorating. It was the most alive I ever felt in my life. I park in a spot of shade and walk around. Downtown, half shut down, cotton gin still going, not strong, but going. Tracks working, neglected, but working. The infamous overpass brought down. September 15, 2004, Hell's Kitchen. Her life surrendered to her body. September 15, the day Padre Hidalgo uttered the famous grito that kicked off the Mexican Revolution. She would have liked that, going off the air on a day marking a great struggle for independence. The river rises from a mountain of granite. The river receives the water of the little river. The house where my friend lived, indefinitely empty, walnuts turning dark in the grass, papers collected on the porch. If I put my face to the glass, I can make out the ghost of her ironing board, bottle of bourbon on the end. Her former husband. I'd come home from work and she would be in a rage, and I just couldn't understand it. They were a poor match. He says so to this day. She said so then. They barely tolerated one another, but they were Catholic, another error bred in the bone. If he looked at her and she looked at him, in 9 months she was back at the lying in. My best guess, she woke up in a rage 8 days a week. Her friends, the musician, the poet, the actor, Gert, she taught me how to live. Now she has taught me how to die. And die, she was my Goomba, my Rafiki. It was the honor of my life to know her. Honor of my life. The only sure thing were the prices and the temperatures. 2 pounds of oleo cost 25 cents, and 5 pounds of Cherokee Freestone peaches are $1. The Cosmos Club president held a tea at her lovely lakeside home. 2 more Big Tree boys made fine soldiers. A Rolling Stone was found dead in the bottom of his swimming pool. Rufus Thomas and his Bearcats will headline at the Negro Fair. And Miss Teenage Arkansas, a comely young miss, is saluted once again for her charm and pulchritude. Sunshine Fresh Hydrox cookies, 1 pound for 59 cents. The assistant warden at 300 pounds is the one identified for administering the strap at the Arkansas Pen, a self-sustaining institution. Several say they were beaten for failing to meet cotton quotas. Others, more often than not, did not know why they were beaten. One testified to more than 70 beatings. The strap is not in question. In question is when it is to be administered. The river is impounded by the lake. Below the lake, the river enters the lowlands. It slithers through cypress and willow, and the air itself cloudy or clear, stirring with smoke or dust or malathion, if you get my drift, must not be construed to be indivisible. No more than blood. There is black blood and white blood. There is black air and white air. This includes the air in the tires blowing out over the interstate between town and river, the air that riddles the children when a crop duster buzzes a schoolyard, the air that bellows from the choir of robes when the very reverend pillow bids be seated, and even the air socked from the jaw of the champ, born 17 miles west in Sand Slough, when he took that phantom punch, the year in which this particular round of troubles began. Today, gentle reader, the sermon once again, segregation after death. Showers in the AM, the threat, they say, is moving from the east. She had a brain like the reading room in the old British Museum. She could have donned fingerless gloves and written Das Kapital while hexagons of snowflakes tumbled by the window panes. She could have made it up whole cloth. She could have sewn the cotton out of her own life while the Thames froze over. She loved words, cats, long-playing records, laughter, men, alcohol, cigarettes, the supernatural. It makes for a carnal list, pointless to rank. 5 in diapers at once, a stench she claimed she never got used to. The river receives another river near its mouth and joins the mighty river to the south of Helena. Yonkapin are the lilies in the ditches, pretty bloom for a filthy drainage ditch, isn't it now? An Arkansas ark is not a rainbow, but an old iron bridge over troubled brown waters. the cornea's collection of the earliest rays, ordering an entirely different distribution of light and shade. I could imagine my friend V being blind and seeing everything, marrying a dozen men and living alone, having 7 children and being barren, toting an M16 that looked like a hoe, whistling down a taxi in a cold capital. I could see the faded and ragged fields replaced by blue shadows on hills of snow, or turning from a stag at the edge of the interstate into a freshwater pearl before more sediment entered the river than flowed from its mouth. Dear Abby, when Darrell and I were first married, he asked me to iron his undershorts. His mother always did. At first I didn't mind because we had no children, but now have 2, and I could save a lot of time tossing them in the dryer and folding them. But I tried that once and I never heard the end of it. Darrell says he could feel the difference. What would you do? Dear Too Much Ironing, I would iron his underwear. You are wasting more energy complaining and arguing than it takes to iron 7 pair of shorts once a week. Everybody has a problem. What's yours? In Big Tree, people are reading their Bibles in bed. Their laces hang by their walking shoes. People are dreaming money, semen, and boll weevils on the creep. The only sure thing in those days were the prices. Jack's Brett tea bags, only 19 cents. A whole fryer is 59 cents. A half gallon of Purex, 25 cents. 2 pounds of oleo, 25 cents. Ivory soap, 10 cents a bar. Cherokee Freestone peaches, 5 cans for $1. And the temperatures. Los Angeles enters its 6th day of rioting, 32 dead. Chicago's rebellion ends in 2. KKK's lawyer dies in Birmingham. Hurricane Camille sacks past Christiane. The president of the Cosmos Club holds a tea. Soybean cyst nematode puts the county's crop under quarantine. 3 Brinkley children die in an icebox. It is time to pick the cotton. She could have been a master teacher, but she said no, she couldn't. She said she had nothing but contempt for her teacher when she discovered she didn't know Swinburne. One ought to admit V could rise in record time to the condition of contempt. Her friend, the actor, she once got on a wrathful tear about a particular member of Congress or some churlish priest and ended up on her feet in a lively enactment of how she would like to saw that MF in half, left-handed. I guess an untidy job of it would hurt a lot more. She kept her Saigon cinnamon in her purse so the 5th boy child couldn't get his hands on it, dragged her sewing machine to her porch because she did not want to have to look at it. When she had cancer after the last child was born and had a hysterectomy, she didn't want anyone to know. She didn't want them saying, that poor woman with all those children and now she's got cancer. Dear Abby, my mother-in-law said she read in your column about how to make dirty diapers disappear. Dear Misinformed, I am not a magician. Everybody has a problem. Harry says, what we really want from our time on this planet is that which is not this. We want the ethical this. We want to feel and transmit. It is known that when a blackbird calls in the marsh, all sound back, and if one note is missing, all take notice. This is the solidarity we are born to. Hell's Kitchen. I don't know what we're watching. She's in her puffy chair, a few feet from her designated deathbed. When she sleeps, it's in the pleather chair in front of her television. The bed has gathered dust and old hair and the bugs that live on our slough. The leading man is dying. He is fitted in a silk robe with tuxedo lapels. He lies in a big poster bed. He has but a handful of breaths left in him. She says to me, he doesn't want to leave his monogrammed pillow slip. She says to me, I am Rafferty, the poet, eyes without sight, mind without torment, going west on my journey. Dear Abby, I am 11 years old, but I know all the facts of life because I live in a dirty neighborhood. My problem is that in our family, we get pregnant quick. My sister got pregnant when she was 16 just by sitting next to a boy in church. Can this be? Dear young miss, no, somebody must have moved. Look into the dark heart, and you will see what the dark eats other than your heart. The world is not ineluctably finished, though the watchfires have been doused. More walls have come down, more walls are being built. Sound of the future, uncanny how close to the sound of the old. At Daddy's eyes, pusherman still on the jukebox. Everybody's past redacted. For me, it has always been a series of doors. If one is opened precipitously, a figure is caught bolting from bed. If another, a small table, a list of demands on school paper. If another, a child on the linoleum saying she wants a white doll. A woman sitting on a bed holding a folded flag, a shelf of trophies behind her head. An ironing board, bottle of bourbon on the end, sewing machine on a porch. To walk down the road without fear, to sit in a booth and order a sweet, soft drink, to work at the front desk, to be referred to as gentleman, to swim in the pool, to sit in the front row and watch Run Wild, Run Free, next week, Death of a Gunfighter, to make your way to the end of the day with both eyes in your head. Nothing is not integral. You want to illumine what you see. Fear reflected off an upturned face, those walnuts turning black in the grass. It is a relatively stable world, gentle reader, but beyond that door, it defies description. Thank you. I did just want to share this with you because I just got this in the mail day before yesterday. There was recently a tribute in this town to the participants of some of the events of 1969, where there was a very protracted economic boycott. And then there were some other things that were more extreme, such as the children at there was a minor uprising at the junior high school, at the black junior high school, and then there was a walkout at the black high school to the white high school, where the children came to the edge of the campus, locked arms, and sang like a tree planted by the water. As a consequence, the superintendent told them if they didn't disperse, return to their own school, they would be arrested. Of course, they really had no plan about how they would arrest this many people for a small town with a small town jail. So, and they knew that they couldn't transport them in school buses. They knew that would not be the right way to do it. So they transported them evidently in sealed trucks. And then they still didn't know what to do with them. They drove them around for hours and hours. Parents didn't know where their children were, were quite alarmed. And there were a couple of teachers arrested with them who becalmed. Eventually the students were taken to the drained swimming pool. It had been drained for the season, and the pool was the public pool, but of course it was open to whites only. So they put the students in the pool by day, and by night they would put them in the Civic Center, and then they would put them back in the pool by day. This went on for several days until several black farmers who owned their own property posted bond. Anyway, that was sort of, this was the point at which my friend got involved, very involved. So they have recently had a couple of events commemorating the March Against Fear that was led by Sweet Willie Wine, and for which my friend drove the water truck, the station wagon, and all of the events of the boycott and the walkouts and everything. And so they sent my friend a certificate in recognition. Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And it gives her name, and then it talks about, in short, not everything that happened, but about sort of the courage of people at that time who did step forward. Many of the children, of course, were forbidden to by their parents. And I noticed that many people who didn't participate, it was a kind of regret of their lives, but they were listening to their mothers. And often they ended up with partners who had been involved in it, and it was sort of the moment of their lives, as it was for my friend. And now she has a certificate for her courage. Thank you.
Thank you to both poets. This has been a wonderful evening, and we appreciate your sharing your words with us. And to all of you, thank you for being here, and we look forward to having you at future Library of Congress poetry events. Thank you for coming.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.